afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Wednesday, December 13th, 2017, our last meeting of the year. I'm Councilman Mike Bonham, the chair. I will be joined shortly by Ms. Martinez. We are going to begin with item number one.
Item number one is the General Manager's report relative to the Department's ongoing projects and programs and recognition of DOT employees for outstanding service.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Salita Reynolds, General Manager for LADOT. And today today is an employee recognition meeting because it's the last one of the year. We're very excited today to acknowledge a very special team from our Taxi Cab and Franchise Regulation Division in our Mobility Management Group. Please stand up when I say your name. Administrative Clerks Ricky Deanda and Omar Castellanos. Senior Administrative Clerks Roma Moore and Beatrice Lopez. And Senior Transportation Investigator Tina Arnold. This team demonstrates excellent customer service every day when serving a very diverse constituent base that includes taxi cab drivers, attendants from ambulance companies, paid transportation companies, and motor bus operator companies. Staff processes up to 500 driver permits and taxi cab vehicle permits per month, mostly through personal transactions at our public counter. Their sensitivity to cultural differences and language barriers promotes a high standard of customer service and ensures that each transaction is handled professionally. In addition to the day-to-day business of the division, this team handles special projects in a timely and efficient manner. One example of this occurred last October when the Transdev Motor Bus Operator Company lost their contract with LADOT to operate the dash buses, and the company was replaced with First Transit. Almost 200 Transdev drivers and their permits had to be transitioned to First Transit within a very short time frame to avoid a dash bus service disruption. This extra permitting work was completed while still processing the normal everyday permitting. Our group eagerly took on this challenge. Roma Moore and Tina Arnold went to the First Transit field office to expedite the required document review process, and staff stayed late several days to process these permits without requiring drivers to appear in person. This extra work allowed a smooth transition, and most importantly, there was no dash bus service disruption for our riders. Please join me in congratulating them for their outstanding performance and their commitment to LADOT's mission and vision.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the outstanding employees, and thanks, Ms. Reynolds, as always, for doing this. I just want to give a shout out to DOT employees, generally speaking, those who were acknowledged today for their work, and for the workforce as a whole. Just at the year end, let me just say thank you on behalf of the entire council for the work that you do, whether you're in an office processing an application or a permit, whether you're out in the field doing an investigation, or whether you're out working a thermoplaster machine. You do amazing work, and we're extremely grateful to you. Thank you.
Very much.
Okay, we'll do a few items and we'll reconsider them when Ms. Martinez gets here. Item 7, I believe there's a technical amendment.
Yes, I'd recommend that you approve the resolution as amended to revise the street limits to include West C Street between North Fries Avenue and North Avalon Boulevard.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that item is deemed approved. I will now do public comment. I have several public comment cards from Leah. You can come on up for a total of 3 minutes. So you have 1 minute for item 1, a minute for item 11, and a minute for general public comment.
Okay.
So item number 11, I'd like to bring to your attention that that was one that you, actually it was, item 11 is, I actually meant to do item 12, so we'll come back to that later. You want me to do that one now? Oh, actually, I can do it on here. It's the same thing. Just to make sure that you're aware of what's happening in Pacific Palisades in your district, Councilman Bonin, and Council District 11, there is a problem along Pacific Coast Highway in the city of Los Angeles where you have all-night parking and you have cracked and broken glass all over the streets, and the animals and birds are eating it. And the glass and the partying all night mixed in with food that's left there, the animals and the birds can't distinguish between the two. Unfortunately, I found a skinned alive seal, I don't know alive, I hope it wasn't alive, a skinned baby seal on the coast, and there was nowhere to report it. So you need to have a place where people can file complaints to tell you what's going on down along Pacific Coast Highway. It's not just on Playa del Rey and Playa del Vista. Going on to number 1, last time I was here on October 25th, 2017, I brought to your attention what was happening on the coastal bluffs, how the hillside has been documented with a slope indicator that it's actually moving. It's physically moving. It broke the entire slope indicator, and you told me it was the wrong place to bring that up to you, even though it's in a public street, RNOA. I looked up the mission statement of LA DOT, and the mission statement is to oversee construction and the whole umbrella for roads and streets, and no one got back to me. So we're going into a rainy season, and nobody's addressing the fact that this RNOA, which also impacts perhaps Pacific Coast Highway with 70,000, 80,000 people going up and down the street, nobody's addressing, no environmental impact report, and Vince Bertoni is giving it exemptions. And right now you have about, and I've handed out a document to you and Councilman Koretz and Nuri Martinez that outlines what's happening on Arno Way, and that you have about 7 different projects there that all got exemptions. Well, that's called piecemealing under the California Environmental Quality Act, which is a problem because you took the word quality out of the written law. Not legally, corruptly. It's published incorrectly. The written law in the state archives, in the city archives and at the law library says California Environmental Quality Act, and you've replaced it with California Environmental Coastal Act, which, fraud on the people and fraud on the courts. So I expected that to get fixed, and that there be an environmental impact report done for track 10179 and all streets in that area.
Thank you. For the record, Ms. Martinez is here, so I'd like to reconsider item number 7, and at the same time approve items 2 through 6, 7, 11, and 13.
Repeat that one more time, 2 through 7.
2 through 7, 11, and 13.
Item 10.
And I have a card on item 10. Thank you, I believe. Okay, great. I have one card on item 10, so I'll take item 10 now.
Item 10 is a DOT report relative to the regional interagency transfer policy change in connection with Metro Transit operations.
Faramars Nabari.
Good afternoon, council members Bonin and Martinez. I'm a resident of the San Fernando Valley, and I'm here to speak on the LA DOT staff report on the regional interagency transfer policy change that Metro is proposing. Specifically, I'm concerned about Metro's proposal to eliminate day passes. This is not necessary to implement the proposed interagency transfer policy change. What Metro is proposing to do is to allow riders to load their tap cards with stored value on buses. That is a good thing. However, they're proposing to do this and at the same time remove the ability to purchase a day pass. So the council understands this is not a technical systems computer problem. The same systems are used by Foothill Transit, a major transit agency. Same tap card. You can go as a rider on the bus and put money on it or get a day pass on it. So Metro doesn't have any technical inability to implement this. However, as a Valley resident, when I'm coming over the hill to downtown, if I need to go to 3 different places to take care of errands, that's 1 day pass, or it could be 4 different fares. So I recommend an oppose unless
Thank you
amended.
very much.
Thank you.
Jay, do you have anything you want to say in response?
Obviously, it's not sort of, DOT that sets that type of policy. However, there might be things that we might consider, at least have a discussion with Metro regarding if there are issues with, let's say the day pass limitations. I know that, I've seen in other agencies where even with the ability to transfer electronically, the way that you could get around that issue might be that you could have a limitation, a daily maximum, if you will, right? If you were to jump around, but if there was a policy that was set in place, it would in essence kind of create a day pass type of a system through that electronic sort of, format. So I think there might be solutions worthwhile for us to, broach Metro staff on, but that would be sort of my comment. I don't really have an answer for this today.
Okay. Yeah, if you can look into that. Otherwise, we'll recommend approval without objection.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so that leaves items 8, 9, and 12. Let's go to item number 12.
Item number 12 is a DOT reports relative to action to rescind the Safe Streets for Playa del Rey Traffic Safety Initiative and related matters.
Okay, we have one public comment card on this. Christina Kropp. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I represent one of the appellants to the Within Action, and I just would like to put on the record the appellant's position that we continue to believe that until full restoration is achieved of the roads, which it has not been, LADOT's non-transparent and unaccountable actions with regard to the road closures continue to be a denial of due process, a fair notice, and continue to be a series of CEQA violations that I can go into today, but seeing as I have a minute, I have submitted a letter to the council members and also to the city clerk concerning all those allegations. It is our position that this appeal is not moot, and we actually ask that the city council grant our appeal to show good faith to all the residents and constituents that have stood up against the road closures, which they believe was a denial of due process and CEQA violations. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've received your letter. I've reviewed it. I know the city attorney's office has reviewed it. DOT recommendation remains the same as the city attorney's? Yes. Okay. Unless there's any objection, we will approve the DOT recommendation. Okay. Thank you. Okay. That brings us to item number 8.
Item number 8 is the DOT report relative to the establishment of a preferential parking district number 235 in the Helms area of CD10.
Okay, we have a number of speaker cards on this one. Elizabeth Carlin from CD10, why don't you come up and frame it for us, and then I'll call up the rest of the staff, or rest of the cards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. Liz Carlin from Council President Weston's office. We're here today to support the preferential parking request that's before you today. The residential community, the Helms community, has been impacted by businesses both on Venice and National. The community made this request because commercial patrons and employees of the businesses are actually parking on the residential streets. And it's important to know that this neighborhood that's in question is only 880 feet away from the Culver City Expo line, and it's only 0.16 of a mile. That's important because Culver City used to have an open parking lot for folks to take the Expo line, and so now we're also having an additional influx of people taking the Expo line and parking their vehicles in the neighborhood. To give some context to this, these streets are very short. On both sides of the street, there's about 12 parcels, so about 24 parcels between when you go to the residential area just north of Venice, all the way to Regent Street. So it's the interior section of north of Venice to Regent, and then bounded by National, but not actually on National and not actually on Venice. So the community followed the process. They worked with DOT, and they followed the rules according to the ordinance as was set out, 180059. They walked the neighborhood. They have over 75% of the support. And so we're respectfully before the body to ask for support. We know there's a lot of people here to speak on the item, and we ask that they be heard and their time be allowed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am very familiar with the area, so I'm well versed in the subject. We have a number of speakers. Jay Bergman, Lance Bergman, Craig First, Don Tonti. Please come on up. Which one is Jay? Please go ahead.
My name's Jay Bergman. I'm a property owner on National Boulevard. We are opposed to this parking restriction. It's the area there on National as well as Venice. There's very limited parking for the businesses, for employees, for customers, and I fear that removing even more parking is really going to hurt all the businesses on the street there on Venice, on National. As it is, it's tremendously difficult, and losing that, I think you're going to lose these small businesses, and ultimately you will have developers coming in, redeveloping the property to mixed use, bringing more congestion into the area, and I think it's just a big mistake and should definitely be reconsidered.
Thank you. Lance Bergman.
Jay Bergman's my brother. I would ask if I could give my time to Craig.
No, we can't transfer time. I'm sorry.
I am also opposed to the permit parking in the neighborhood, essentially for the same reasons. The one point that I would like to point out is that the homeowners, there are a lot of other things that come along with putting permitted parking in the area, and I hope that is considered. We are constantly having parking as an issue, and the businesses are just getting pushed out of that area. I know you said you're very familiar, but it's a struggle, and we're just hoping that something could be done to kind of mitigate it.
Okay, Craig.
Hi. So I want to start by saying that none of these property owners, including me, got formal notice. The only reason we're here is because I happened to find it on the website. So none of us have the proper time to prepare, and I'd actually like to postpone this opportunity so we could formally prepare and provide you guys with a substantive response as to what all of our concerns are. A minute isn't quite sufficient. I do want to state that we believe I'm particularly interested in you guys reconsidering Regent Street. I will leave all these photos for you guys to look at your leisure, but as you can see clearly, Regent Street abuts the 10 freeway. There are no residences on the north side of Regent at all. We employ over 150 people at that location. There's a good chance you could push us out of the city. I don't know if that's what the city of LA wants to do, but some of my other colleagues here who own businesses are considering the same thing. I'd love to stay where I'm at.
Thank you. Mr. Tonti?
Yes. I own a property on Venice Boulevard. I have a moving company there, and myself, my manager, and my employees need a place to park. And they're putting up restrictions on the side streets. It would be a serious handicap for us. I also, the building that I own, that I run my business out of, has two tenants on the upper floor. These tenants also would have no place to park if there were restrictions. It'd be a serious handicap for my business.
Okay, thank you. Next speakers are Jenny Lim, Kyle Christie, Floyd Fouquet, and Don Buck. Please go ahead, Ms. Lim.
My name is Jenny Lim, and I own a maid service business on the corner of Venice and Cattaraugus. And before I moved in, that building was literally tagged every week, and it was a mess probably an eyesore for the whole neighborhood. So ever since I moved in, the building has been cleaned up. It's actually a very nice area. I own maid service, so I have about 20-some employees coming to work. Half of them will drive a car. But we're there from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon, and they are all gone, and we don't work weekends. So when the residents are at work, we're using the parking on the streets, not when they are on the weekends. We don't work. So we're using the public street for parking for that purpose, and this will actually be really it will be really bad. I might have to move out if I get parking problems.
Hi, good afternoon. I too have a business on Venice Boulevard. I own an acupuncture clinic there. I built the building.
What's your name, sir?
Don Buck.
Okay.
I built the building back in 2003. I tore down a crack house and an abandoned building, and I put a parking space for my patients. In addition, I need some street parking. Venice Boulevard has been changed into 2-hour parking, which has been great. We don't have people camping out there anymore, but we depend on the side streets as well for the people. Venice Boulevard is a mixed use of small businesses and apartment living. We should have the same rights as the people behind us have. In fact, on the other side of my alleyway, a new person has built a complex of 8 4-story homes, of which took over 2 small Spanish homes. I went around letting the residents know this was going to happen. I even translated the English version that the city sent out to Spanish and attached it to let them be aware of what was going on. Nobody had a problem with the parking issue at that time. I don't know why it's become an issue now. I think if more people use their driveways, we would have less of an issue. No one uses their driveways in that neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Sir?
Floyd Fouquet, God bless you. Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand.
Excuse me, sir, we're going to hold your time. Mr. Spindler, that was your first and only warning. Please, sir, go ahead.
Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand. The community divided cannot stand. A community divided cannot stand. This is a residential neighborhood. This is not a residential neighborhood. It's a transit-oriented neighborhood. Mixed-use community. We are not a residential-only community. It's mixed use. Even transportation, the city designated this as a transit or TOD, a transit-oriented district. The city will allow revenue-generating mechanism on this. When you do the math, the residents will pay $10,500 to the city for permits, but the city will gain $87,500 to $250,000 per year. So certainly Wesson's office and the city council wants to support this. It's a good gain for the city. It hurts our community. In my building, I own a building, I put my life savings into a 5,000 square foot building that was permitted in 1964 with 6 parking in the back. I only have 6 parking spaces for 6 tenants. My vacancy rates will triple, quadruple, my rents will go down. This will hurt me and my family. This is my retirement. They are hurting me. The residents do not own this street.
Thank you, sir.
I want to mitigate this issue.
Excuse me, sir.
If you let me work directly with the community.
Sir, your time is up.
I'd like to ask for more time later, please.
No, I'm sorry, we can't do that.
Thank you.
We have to give the same treatment to everybody.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Kyle Christie, and I live in this neighborhood. I represent over 300 people in the neighborhood association. I respectfully appreciate all these business owners saying what they've said, but it is our neighborhood, and it is residential because we live there. The businesses that are talking about all these Venice facing, we're not asking for anything on Venice, and that's not anything we're talking about. We are 6 streets, and we represent those 6 streets, including Regent as well. Our neighborhood has cleaned these streets, planted trees on these streets. We watch out over these streets. These business owners, they do have a right to be there, but they do not have a right to park in front of other people's houses, which happens every single day. We have arguments on the daily basis with people from these businesses parking in front of people's houses, blocking driveways, etc. We have followed all the rules. We have over 100% of the streets that want this are in support of this. We have 100% of those streets for half the neighborhood. The rest of the neighborhood falls from 85 to that 100%. Our entire neighborhood wants this, needs this, and deserves this.
Thank you very much. Ms. Carlin still here? So just wanted to clarify for the record, you indicated that the neighbors have collected the requisite petition signatures for this?
Yes, they have, sir.
And the council office has engaged with all perspectives on this and made their recommendation?
Yes, we made the recommendation, and we followed the rules and procedures that were set out by the guidelines that DOT has established. We were told that the noticing requirement came when we went to the Transportation Commission, and then we were told that we go directly to council on this. There was never anything that we were told where the letters would get mailed, like in city planning when you have some kind of notice or disclosure sent out. So there was never a process. We asked DOT, is there a process where the businesses get some kind of letter in the mail or that they go someplace? And we were told that the appropriate place was Transportation Commission.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you. So to those who are here to testify on this, I know this is an issue where opinions are divided and there's conflicting sentiment, and obviously it's not an easy issue. My perspective as chair of the committee is there's no member of the council who knows this issue better than the one who represents the issue or represents the area, so I'm certainly going to defer to Mr. Wesson's recommendation and approve the petition. Is there any objection? Okay, so the item is approved. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 9.
You never served this notice. This item was properly noticed on the agenda item. It was properly noticed by the city clerk for 72 hours before the meeting was held.
Item number 9 is a DOT report in response to a Rue Blumenfield motion relative to developing a pilot program to test dockless bike sharing in Los Angeles and related matters.
Okay, we have a number of public comment cards before staff comes up, and it is a rogues gallery of council offices. Mr. Jacob Berger from City 3, Mr. Grief from City 4, Mr. Helms from City 15. I don't know.
Mr. Jacob had to go to a different committee, so he's not going to be able to speak.
Right. Which name for the record?
CD3.
No, your name.
Oh, Nate Holmes, CD15.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were speaking for
No, I'm
CD3.
telling you that, yeah.
Okay.
Jeff from CD3.
All right. So
kick off.
Go ahead, Nick.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Bonin and committee members for having me here today and scheduling this item. My name is Nick Greif, Policy Director for Councilmember David Rue, and I speak on behalf of him today in support of his motion to establish a dockless bike share pilot as well as rules and regulations for the industry. Our residents in the 4th Council District are clamoring for more transportation options. They want multiple, easy-to-use modes of transit to choose from if they don't want to drive, are interested in losing the second family vehicle, or even go completely carless. At this point, for most people in the 4th Council District at least, this is not generally a practical reality. We would like to make it more practical. And one of the quickest and most effective ways we can do that is to bring bike sharing to every resident in Los Angeles. Our docked Metro bike system currently operating in Los Angeles is working well in areas with enough density and income to sustain the significant infrastructure investment of the docked system. But for areas that are less dense, such as Sherman Oaks in our district, we won't see docked bikes anytime soon, if at all. That is why dockless bikes are our best and possibly only option to bring bike share mobility to all corners of our city and do so quickly. The boons here, we think, are apparent. Bike share access for all LA residents, natural solutions to the first mile, last mile problem, lower emissions, new road users incentivized to advocate for safer streets, and competition for customers that will improve price and services for our residents. We also must be cognizant of and careful to craft policies that avoid issues that some cities have faced after haphazardly embracing dockless bikes. Our pilot should focus on ensuring that we learn how to regulate in such a way that we maintain an equitable distribution of bikes to make good on our promise that all Angelenos will have bike share access. We also need to ensure bikes are dropped off in a responsible manner, bicycle quality is maintained, and data sharing agreements put in place. In closing, our city is by and large a city of sprawl. Just like a sprawling city is best served by an efficient network of buses that can take advantage of the city's design, dockless bikes provide an opportunity to serve all corners of our city, regardless of density. We should work hard to embrace this technology and bring cycling access to our 4 million constituents. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to moving this forward.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nate Holmes on behalf of Councilman Joe Buscaino and the fine people of the 15th District. I would like to start with a quick note of contrition with apologies to William Carlos Williams. This is just to say we have partaken of the Limebikes that are now proliferating from Watts to the waterfront, and which you were probably saving for a more deliberative discussion involving the City Council, DOT, the City Attorney, and other relevant departments. Forgive us, they were delectable, so shiny, and so ripe for the provision of greater mobility. On that note,
Branimir didn't write that one.
I would just like to give you just the briefest of reports that we've had a great experience so far with this dockless pilot in CD15. The response has been very positive. Our residents were obviously surprised and perplexed, but overall happy that something this exciting is happening in our district, and we haven't seen any of the horror stories materializing that we were warned about might happen, and so we're seeing more people on bikes, and we're happy about that. And we're also happy that we have 2 pilots. All right, we're not just doing dockless. We have the Metro bike share. We're looking forward to see how both pilots work. And so I think just we want to keep something in mind as we go forward with this discussion, that if we keep our eyes on the prize here, we want more people riding bikes. And we have, big problems potentially in the future about bikes cluttering sidewalks, interfering with the public realm. Potentially we could have, a market that's oversaturated with several companies in the same turf. But we want to make sure that we keep our eyes on the fact that the problem today is that not enough people are riding bikes, and we want to resolve these other issues in a manner that keeps us moving toward more people riding bikes. And that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both. Lindsay Nolan and Peter Hoban. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Nolan, and I'm I'm Policy and Outreach Coordinator at LA County Bicycle Coalition. LACBC supports LADOT's recommendations for the dockless bike share pilot program, especially around safety and outreach. We also want to urge City Council and LADOT to prioritize equity in rolling out this program by ensuring that pilots and ongoing operations include low-income communities and communities of color, and are not solely concentrated in more touristy, well-off neighborhoods. Moreover, we know that cities that have successful bike share programs are in places that have safe streets and infrastructure that support cycling. If council members want to see bike share grow and thrive, they must recommit to and invest in Vision Zero and ensure implementation of street safety improvements. Thank you.
Amen. Please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Council Members Bonin and Martinez. My name is Peter Hoban. I'm the COO of Bicycle Transit Systems, the operator of Metro Bike Share. I've worked in the bike share industry for 8 years and have been involved in the implementation and operation of the largest bike share systems in the US and in Australia. We congratulate LADOT staff for taking such great effort in creating some robust guidelines and regulations, and we look forward to continuing to work with them as dockless comes into Los Angeles. We have been looking at the dockless industry for a while, and we do have some concerns that we think this committee needs to keep at the forefront of their mind when making decisions. Firstly, safety. An independent audit in Seattle and DC showed that 1 in 10 dockless bike shares had a major safety defect, compared to 1 in 100 in Metro Bike Share, which is significantly better. We are seeing impacts of this already in Los Angeles. Accessibility and clutter. All cities that have had dockless have experienced issues with vandalism and bike abandonment in the public right-of-way. Already we are seeing some of this in downtown LA, which is outside the pilot zone. And lastly, privacy. We think there's some concerns with data accessibility. Right now, one of the operators in LA allows 27 third-party companies access to data on your phone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you say 27?
27, yeah. And those are unregulated and uncontrolled.
Okay. Staff, come on up. Okay, first of all, before I ask the staff to report, I just want to thank staff for responding so quickly for what is a very dynamic situation. This is a huge opportunity for Los Angeles to get dockless bike share and to provide mobility options for people that otherwise don't have them. Hold on just a second. Mr. Herman, you and Mr. Herman, you and Mr. Spindler arrived late after I closed receipt of cards for public comment. After I had closed receipt of cards. No, I don't. No, I don't.
Spindler, you're disrupting the meeting.
Chair, are we good?
Still got to comply with the Brown Act. You know, if you look at the back, I mean, that's where it is.
He hasn't.
What did I say? Why the fuck are you picking on me?
Okay.
All
right, so.
Why the fuck are you picking on me? You're laughing, you're looking at me, fucking asshole.
I was about to say Mr. Herman hadn't done anything to be thrown out for, but then.
Don't even look at me, you fucking faggot, drug addict. That's your problem. You're so fucked up on drugs, you're stupid. Asshole, motherfucker, dumbass, LOL, laugh out loud. And to that other B.I.G. bitch, she could shove a big apple in her mouth and educate herself.
Well, that escalated.
Leslie Knope never had to deal with this stuff. Okay. You go ahead.
Well, at least it's nice now.
Yeah.
Marcel Porras, Chief Sustainability Officer.
Let me get back to where I was. Thank you. So as we're saying, dockless bike share is an opportunity for Los Angeles. It's one there's a definite interest in by a number of different council districts. But DOT has properly been saying, let's think about how we do this and what the rules and the regulations are and what the trade-offs are. What does the city get for having these operators come in here? What liability issues need to be addressed? What public right-of-way issues need to be addressed? We've just gotten a lawsuit settled over a period of several years about accessibility of our sidewalks, which is allowing sidewalk repair, the privacy issues, data sharing, licensing, and a number of different things. So we've asked DOT to get into that. Tell us what you have done over the past couple months and what your recommendations are today.
Sure. Marcel Porras, Chief Sustainability Officer at LADOT. So as you expressed, I think there is a lot of interest, and as we've heard from other city council offices, there's a lot of interest in piloting dockless bike sharing here in Los Angeles. It is a new technology that we've seen starting to pop up around the country. I think as of the last count, there's around 30 different pilots happening across the city. I think some of the things that LADOT has done to start to prepare itself for recommendations around dockless pilot is we've had some ongoing conversations with the city of Seattle and Washington, D.C., who are both recognized as cities that are leading in the space in terms of developing regulatory frameworks. I think it is important to note that in the city of Seattle, which is looked as biggest dockless bike share system in the country, they currently don't have a publicly funded bike share system. They've actually had a couple tries at it, and so for them, I think engaging the private sector for a dockless system was the only route that they actually had at their disposal. So I think it's important to note that. That being said, there are some really important lessons that we've learned, and we can go. I'm going to have a PowerPoint presentation just talk about some of the buckets that we've considered. But I think largely we see dockless bike share as another mobility option. I think it's important for us to continue to evolve with technologies as they are presented to the city and evaluate them, understand the different levers that we have to manage and to learn from them so that we can make recommendations to this policy committee about how that should grow.
Before you do the PowerPoint, let me just ask, because you mentioned Seattle and D.C. I understand Seattle's program has been really well run. D.C.'s pretty good, and San Francisco's has been not good. What has made those programs vary in their degrees of success, and what lessons do we learn from that?
So I think I feel most comfortably talking about Seattle because it's the one that I've spent the most time with. So the city of Seattle has identified both an enforcement structure as well as an evaluation structure for their pilot. They have data is so important as in looking at evaluation, and I think it's the one thing that we hear a lot when we talk with the private sector about the city accessing data. We've heard the same thing in car sharing, concerns about data. One of the things that the city of Seattle has done to address that issue is actually contract with a third party. And so the University of Washington has developed a lot of technical capacity around receiving, storing, and evaluating data. And I think there's something within either the state of Washington or the university itself, because it's a research institution, that provides them with additional protections from being discoverable. So I think that's one of the questions that we need to look at here in California in terms of what our protections are in that discussion. But that is a key piece. On top of that, the University of Washington has dedicated research staff that actually can crunch the numbers and look at the data. I think that's something that the department is looking at as we continue to engage transportation technology firms about how we manage data and the analysis to do the data. I think one point to that is so that's on the data side and the evaluation side. On the really key to this is also doing your individual spot checking and making sure that the data that is being reported is actually verified. And so I think as the city thinks about how we would actually look at that, we've engaged the Bureau of Street Services and the Bureau of Sanitation about what enforcement looks like and begin preliminary discussions. I think in the city of Seattle, they've actually been doing spot checks with student interns. And so developing a methodology, and those interns are out in the street 30 hours a week with the various apps, testing to see if the information that's being provided, if the response time that the companies are committing to are actually being abided to. And so that's one of the things that for us is going to be one of the key pieces that we're going to need to understand because DOT doesn't actually have jurisdiction over the sidewalks. Mm-hmm. And so we need to have that city family conversation and understand how are we, once we actually determine where the pilot would be, the number of bikes, et cetera. I think it's really key to understand, okay, on an ongoing level, how are we continuing to have a feedback loop around the data, the evaluation, and the enforcement?
Ms. Reynolds, could you give us any insight into why things didn't work as well in San Francisco? I know you have history up there.
Sure. So that happened after my departure, but San Francisco was really the first city where dockless showed up, and there really was no outreach or conversation with the city prior to just everybody in the city blowing my phone up saying, there's a rumor that there's a barge from China with thousands of bikes on it that are just going to be dumped on the streets of San Francisco. So,
Is that what happened?
and that, something like that happened, but Dennis Herrera, who's the city attorney, issued a cease and desist. And so from the very beginning, the city was in a very defensive posture, right, because of the way that the news had come out and the way that that company in particular had initiated their operation. So then they created a permitting structure. The planning department was in charge of that. They allowed the dockless bike share to start operating in San Francisco and just found violations. And then issued another sort of, communication that they needed to cease operations. And then I haven't kept up with sort of the ongoing acrimony there, but I think that part of the issue was that the relationship started out on the wrong foot, and it only went downhill from there. And these companies are not, you heard the comment earlier about data. These are data companies. They are building their wealth on a new economic model that is about the collection and sale of data. They're not mobility companies. So when they come into a city, they don't really spend a lot of time necessarily understanding, how that city operates its public realm. They don't spend a lot of time sort of figuring out, for us, the way to increase people riding bikes is to invest in infrastructure. If a bike shows up, a free bike shows up in your neighborhood, that's nice, but if there's nowhere safe to ride it, then you really only have part of the equation. So understanding that synergy, and really, I think there are companies on the dockless side or free-floating side, let's call it, that are good actors, that want to be good partners, and the North Star that we want to ladder up to is absolutely that people have choices in how they get around our city. But I would argue that there are different ways to go about it. For example, we might decide that the city wants to issue a request for interest from all of these companies and invite those kinds of proposals into the city, and then get a better understanding about what each of them are willing to sort of offer in exchange for being able to start their business on our streets. And I think it's important for us to remember what happened when companies like Uber and Lyft did the same thing, right? We allowed them to start a business on our streets because initially it seemed like what was being offered was a new choice for people. Right. And I would argue that that has played out. But now, 3 years later, when we're finally starting to get data from different cities where they operate, we're seeing that there are pros and cons. In cities like New York City, they're actually increasing congestion and increasing vehicle miles traveled. They're mostly used by wealthier, well-educated folks in urban environments. There's not necessarily an equity component. So really being very, very assertive from the beginning about our expectations and about the data that we want. If this is a pilot and we are going to learn from it, then there has to be a genuine partnership and sharing of data. So I think that those are some of the considerations I would have. All of that to say, there are huge parts of this city where Metro Bike Share is not going to reach anytime soon. And we want those Angelenos to have access to Bike Share the same way that the folks in the Metro Bike Share station areas do. And this is a really promising, exciting way to do that. But we shouldn't necessarily get excited about it just because it's new, and allow it to come into the city in a way that we might not have intended. So I think Seattle and DC offer us a great roadmap for how to do that, how to initiate that conversation. I think there are other models and ways of doing it, and I think there are exciting opportunities here. But I think that it wouldn't be responsible of me to not flag some of these other issues and concerns that our sister cities have too, right?
Thank you. Okay.
So I think to follow up on your question about what else we've been doing, I think we've been engaging with our partners nationally. And so the NACDO, North American City Transportation Official, has a policy team that has been engaging on dockless bike share. And so we've been participating in ongoing conversations with our partner cities. We've also, last week, we held a meeting with various city partners, stakeholders, council offices, and we invited the dockless bike share industry. And so to begin, we started kind of going through some of the major buckets of that we had flagged based on our research of Seattle and DC, and that's what's laid out in the report. I can go over some of those buckets through the PowerPoint just to articulate some of the things that we're looking at, but I think we would be asking for the opportunity to go back and sit down with both interested council offices, the industry, and start articulating some of the more rules and guidelines around what a pilot would look like.
And I would just add one thing, which is that anytime we open up a new business line of regulation, we've opened up a new area of enforcement.
Yep.
Right? And so thinking about maybe a different model rather than regulating and enforcement, but might be of interest, because it's not clear, even if DOT comes up with a set of regulations, who's the regulatory arm or the enforcement arm, and what does enforcement look like, and are those resources going to be provided in the budget, right? So that's something else that we learned from having Uber and Lyft show up, is that the city carries the enforcement burden, and the city pays for that enforcement, and it's not enough to prevent some of the activity that we would like to regulate around. So I just want to make sure that we don't always. I think Councilwoman Martinez always does a good job of pointing out that, but I wanted to daylight it in particular. It's on my mind.
Keep pointing it out.
Yeah, keep it up. Yeah, great.
So what are you recommending we approve today?
Just file the report and then recommend that we come back in 45 days with further information. I think we can start looking at a regulatory framework, like rules and actually guidelines. But part of that is also engaging and in those 45 days, we plan on engaging the industry and specific council offices.
And we're looking for guidance from this committee.
Yeah,
about
well,
those
in
regulations.
addition to the stuff we've addressed, I mean, I think specifically you need to look at whether or not there should be permitting fees to recoup some of the city's costs, and how you build in an equity component. If you're going to have the opportunity to do this in Mr. Rue's district, where there seems to be a demand, how do we make sure that it happens in Ms. Martinez's or Mr. Harris Dawson's district, or my district and Mr. Cedillo's district, or if you're going to do a pilot where you want, maybe you should do a pilot where we want as well.
A few questions. So I know that the city has financial investment in Metro's Share Bike program. Do we know how the dockless share program will impact the existing program that we have? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, I think it will compete directly. It's currently happening in the Harbor District, where the Port of LA is invested in Metro Bike Share along with Metro. So that's one of the things that we have to be cognizant. So one of the things specifically in the report, there's a section about Metro Bike Share, and I think one of the things that I don't need to deliberate anymore on specifically is that we would want any dockless pilot to actually not be adjacent to existing Metro Bike Share now. I think but we also have to be careful about that, because at the end of the day, we have to have some flexibility, because if at the end of the day someone is riding a bike from Watts to downtown LA, that bike is providing a mobility option. And so we also want to make sure that we are holding the customer and the customer experience at the forefront of our considerations. But I think that it would be, okay, well, within 24 hours, you got to return that to the home base. And it wouldn't make sense for us to say, okay, let's penalize the user $50, or something extreme for taking it out of there. So I think those are some of the things that we are just starting to think about, because this industry is so new.
But you'll include in the report?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question I had, shouldn't we be looking at areas that we don't currently have Metro Share Bike programs?
Yep.
And test them out there as a possible pilot?
Yes.
Yes.
So you are looking into that. Do we currently know how many dockless share operators currently exist or that would be interested in Los Angeles? Do you have any idea?
There were 4 that attended the meeting last week, and I know that there's...
Is it the same 4 that San Francisco, Seattle, or Washington, D.C. are currently using, or is it different ones?
Yes.
The same ones?
Same ones. And we know that there are at least 2 companies that have their bikes in Los Angeles right now.
What are the names of the companies?
3. Limebike, which is operating in CD15. OFO, which has a right of entry permit with Griffith Park. So they're operating in the Griffith Park area. And then Spin Bike has been seen throughout the city in different places, but it's hard for me to tell if they're open for business or if they're just out there doing marketing events, because I think they have the ability to partner with private sectors to do promotional events. They were most recently, both of those companies were at Ciclavia, just with the booth, just demonstrating their bikes. So they're in the area.
I concur with you, Salida, on everything you pretty much mentioned. The enforcement piece will fall on the city of LA, and that's often the piece that we don't get right, unfortunately, on everything that we do and act on. The enforcement piece, everything, since I've been here, falls short from being perfect. So I think we need to work on that piece, but interesting to read the report. 45 days you're asking for? That's all.
And another thing to think about, the question of whether or not you put the dockless with the Metro bikes. Clearly, there's not enough capacity for the Metro bikes, so you want to put those elsewhere. I think that makes sense. If that's the case, then I think we need to look at building something into the pilots or to a permitting system once we do it that requires a company to have to give some notice if they're going to pull out, because if that becomes part of somebody's mobility option, if that's how, if they've accepted a job because this is part of how they get there, you can't just all of a sudden wake up one morning and have them having pulled the bikes out and no longer be there.
Yeah, I think it is important to note that this is a startup. These are startups, and what's going to happen in a sort of a startup industry is explosive, right? They're going to expand, contract, combine, and it has the potential to be disruptive in that way.
Can I ask you something? Is this a real picture?
Yes.
Where is this at?
China.
China?
That's where they started.
That's where they started. Okay. Did you see this? It's like a mountain of bicycles that never...
You sure it's not downtown San Pedro?
I didn't look.
Not yet.
No, not yet. Let's hope not.
That barge pulled up in San Pedro.
Well taken.
Okay, so we will approve the item as recommended.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the agenda. We have one general public comment card. Dory Frank. Dory still here?
In February of this year, an emergency expenditure was made for a signal at Rosewood and La Brea. I'm here on behalf of the Orthodox Jewish community saying that the reason why it was submitted was because there wasn't money in the budget. It is now 10 months later, and still no signal has been installed. Children's lives are at stake, and people in the religious community walk on Sabbath are at stake. So the choice is whether or not you rely on millions and millions of lawsuits in case people get killed, or you want to prove it. I know that Mr. Milstein isn't here. His kid was almost killed 2 years ago. So I like to know what's taking so long for this to be done, given now it's winter and it's dark. I'd like to know from you, Councilman Bonin, because Paul Kritz is not here, why it has not been done yet. What's more important? A bike lane's less important than this. So I'm asking you a question.
We can't respond to things that are not on the agenda. I can refer you to Councilman Koretz's office, since he's the one
here today, actually. So I would like you to look into and wonder why it's not been installed. Traffic and Safety still hasn't done it.
I'll ask someone from LADOT to discuss it, Mr. Frank. Thank you. All right, that concludes today's meeting. We are adjourned.